What's going on, YouTube? It is Mike from the Hardcover Comic here. And today, as you can see, we're talking about another set of custom binds I've got. Swamp Thing Fever. So this is, of course, as you can see, it's the Mark Millar, Grant Morrison stuff. The thing is, there are two books here. And there's the spine. Hopefully you guys can see that. Didn't go too crazy on it, but I really dig that image of Swamp Thing. The hardest part with doing any connecting spines like this is always getting, pretty much always getting the artwork for it. And unfortunately, this run does not have too much artwork that you can use, so I had to be pretty creative with my pickings. But here we got the front for. Oh, sorry, this is volume 2, guys. Let's look at volume 1 first, because that came first. There's volume 1, using one of the covers for the series. This is also one of the covers for the trade paperbacks, but I dig it. It's a nice stylized cover. So as you guys know, this was written by Mark Millar with some Grant Morrison in there as well, with pretty much all the artwork done by Phil Hester. There's the back, like I said, again, slim picking on the artwork, so I had to use, pretty much a cover for it. Now on the inside, got a sort of a split flap. It says, "Shed your humanity as I have, allow nature to take its course." And then the other side of that split here, there's so much to look forward to, so many wonders lie ahead. Really like that quote. Definitely speaks towards the book. And as I'm sure you guys can tell, there's a pretty significant difference between the sizes of volume 1 and 2. Due to the nature of the storyline and the trade paperbacks, I just had to do the split kind of awkwardly like this. In terms of the run itself, I believe this takes place after the Nancy Collins stuff. Grant Morrison and Mark Millar tag team a little bit at the start, and then Mark Millar takes care of the series fall afterwards. We do see Swamp Thing's life sort of fall apart here. His relationship, and we get to see a lot of we see a couple recurring villains come back. There's some pretty interesting storylines with, again, really freaky characters. The horror element of Swamp Thing is very much alive in this run, which is great. But it does get a little crazy near the end, which I'll get into once we start talking about Volume 2. But Volume 1 has some pretty interesting story arcs, using various gods and stuff. And then once Mark Millar takes over, Sargon, I think, is in here too. I think the weirdest thing that happens sort of is once Mark Millar takes over, he does this story arc. I forget what it's called. It's called the Book of Rivers, maybe? A river book, something like that. And essentially, this woman's writing this book, and Swamp Thing's getting pulled into these different dimensions and different storylines, and he's becoming a part of them. So we see some other artists jump in at this point. That was an all right storyline. And then we've got this really creepy. This is one of the universes, I think, where, it's kind of gross. It's got some scarecrow rape in it. But really, it's still interesting. I didn't hate it by any stretch of the imagination. It's just different. Sometimes it gets a little slow. Sometimes it gets a little weird. But it is Swamp Thing, so it all makes sense. And, at the end of the day, like I said, it's not bad content. And then Volume 2, let me just bring that up here. We'll show that off a little bit. So I got the Darker Genesis trade paperback cover here on the front. And then on the back is this sweet black and white artwork. I think this was a cover as well, if I'm not mistaken. And then I got another split flap from the City of the Dead storyline. Really cool. I really dug that. And of course, split flaps are fun. And then in this volume, things get a little weirder. So basically, Swamp Thing starts going around to the other parliaments. He's starting to get recruited by them. And he basically starts becoming the avatar for them as well. So he goes to the Parliament of Stones, I think, the Parliament of Flames, the Parliament of Winds, stuff like that, and he begins growing his power set and expanding it to the point where we get to this 1 year later part where it's sort of like it really reminded me of Miracle Man in that sense, where Miracle Man, you know, you've got this storyline for the first two arcs where it's still outside the box for sure. But you get into volume 3, I think it's called Olympia, and it's just like they've created this utopia. All this stuff has changed. They've evolved so much further than they had been before, where the characters are almost unrecognizable, and there's a bunch of crazy stuff that happens. It's very interesting. Like I said, there's a lot of really cool sorcery and a lot of cool mystical stuff going on. Mark Millar does a really fun job exploring that side of the DC universe. We do get to see John Constantine, and obviously Abigail Arcane is present throughout the story. And it's interesting, right? Swamp Thing's sort of moving away further and further from his humanity, and then folks are trying to sort of bring him back to it, and you know, it's interesting. It's been a while since I've read this, been a hot minute, but like I said, there's a lot of different stuff that happens in here. It's another interesting take on the character, where the character, you know, at times is not the focal point of the story. He's just sort of you know, he's a character that he's a recurring character in the story, but the story's not necessarily about him. And I enjoyed that. Overall, I think it's a pretty solid run. Like I said, it gets a bit weird with oh yeah, there's this story arc too where this is all taking me back. I don't remember a lot of these names and stuff, but yep, that's right. Jim Rook basically needs to help save the universe. And yeah, it's interesting. I highly recommend you guys check it out. There are 3 trade paperbacks in total. I don't think they're numbered. I think they're, you know, Darker Genesis. They're named. I forget what the names are, but actually, the root of all evil, I think, is the first one. It has this cover, so you know, check those out. You know, it's I don't know again if we're ever going to get an official release for this. I would think so. If we're getting Nancy Collins, I would hope a Mark Millar, Grant Morrison omnibus is on the way after. We'll see. Of course, with DC, you never know. So. I know Matt is planning to bind these as well, but he's planning to do 1 volume for this pretty much, and then the Brian K. Vaughan stuff as well. So it'll be really interesting to see what Matt does too. But yeah, thank you guys very much for tuning in. Let me know if you've read this run, if you're interested in hoping for an official omnibus release for it. You know, it'd be nice if we get one, but you never know. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. This is Mike from the Hardcover Comic. As always, until next time, you stay classy, Internet.